Traversing an unimportant corner of the galaxy orbiting your garden-variety white star, you may find, if you are lucky, a small rock. This rock should rightfully hold no place in your memory among the trillions of identical rocks you've passed along the way. However, this one happened to be the birthplace of somebody I had the enormous pleasure of meeting. His name was Micromegas. He was 120,000 feet tall, which means a little over 20,000 of me would have to stand on our shoulders to rival his great size, although I'm sure 20,000 of me would probably find a more practical method of burying our height insecurities. Micromegas was barely 500 years of age when he graduated from his studies at Sirius's most prestigious academy. He discovered 7 new atomic elements for his entry, managed to successfully reanimate a formerly extinct species which human tongue simply could not pronounce, and on his 67th freshman year developed a chamber that converts light into dairy, much to the dismay of the lactose intolerant, which oddly enough made up 3/4 of his planet. He decided that the drama was not worth his time and left the planet for a gap century. He traveled on a vessel powered by sunbeams because he was all about that life, soaring through the Milky Way in a matter of days. It wasn't long before this traveler set his eyes upon the rings of Saturn, which he initially mistaken for a parking lot due to its insignificant size. Micromegas couldn't help but feel smug towards the inferiority of this planet and its dwarfish inhabitants, for they only stood at an embarrassing 6,000 feet tall. It is a common practice throughout the universe to laugh at short people. After a few weeks of worldwide hysteria and threats of war due to the visit of this colossal alien, the Saturnians finally settled down. Micromegas had become friends with one of the local academics. The two held many conversations about the biodiversity of life throughout the universe. Micromegas asked the Saturnian, "How many senses do your species have?" To which the other responded, "Well, that was rather forward. Is your species too evolved to initiate small talk before diving to that kind of shit?" "Sorry," replied Micromegas, "but yes, we are." "Fine, it's 72. Happy? It's not a lot, but it's all we have. Now you're gonna laugh for 10 days like you did when I told you we've only discovered 6 dimensions, or are you going to be serious?" "My friend," said the foreign giant, "Sirius is my middle name, as is tradition with my people to adopt the name of the planet as our middle name. We all have the same middle name. It's incredibly stupid." "Traditions usually are," agreed the dwarf. "My species have merely a few thousand senses. It restricts us mercilessly, especially the knowledge that you nor I hold no more importance to the universe than a turd floating in space." "I take offense to that analogy, for our species had only recently invented turd-based rocket propulsion," proclaimed the Saturnian. I did not know this," Micromegas apologized. "With the grand scale of the universe, that is the most appropriate thing to say," assured the Saturnian. After a year of discussion, the two academics abandoned the Saturnian atmosphere and flew to a great number of worlds in the system. They first visited the Jovian moon of Europa, home to the Europeans. It is notable to mention that the name of the moon shared nothing in common with the Earth continent of Europe, and is merely a coincidence. The two giants set foot in the land of Switzerland, also a coincidence, to learn about the species' philosophies and scientific discoveries. After a few weeks of worldwide hysteria and threats of war, the beings settled down, and yet another period of enlightenment dawned on a much younger race. After several stops across the Milky Way, the giants couldn't help but felt they missed a planet. It had occurred to them that a very small and very unimpressive-looking speck evaded their excessively various senses. They begin their descent onto the youngest world that they've yet to encounter. These gargantuan beings pierce the Earth's atmosphere, shrouding the planet in immense darkness and environmental catastrophe. They inspected the tediously tiny terrain for the dominant species, or at least one that had the intelligence to look skyward when a face the size of Uganda parts the clouds. If there was life, it certainly wasn't innovative enough to terraform their own planet to increase stability and weather patterns, as the people of Sirius did shortly after inventing the wheel. Micromegas had begun to pack his tools when the Saturnian spotted what appeared to be a small fish, but was actually a humpback whale wriggling in the shallow pond he was soaking his feet in. He plucked the mammal from the Atlantic Ocean and inspected it closely, feeling smug towards the inferior size of this planet and its dwarfish inhabitants, for they only appeared to be 40 feet long. The two giants studied the tiny and very confused whale and concluded that intelligent life had yet to evolve on this primitive muddy rock. Suddenly, a vessel as unnoticeable as the whale from the same puddle caught the eyes of the Saturnian. Adjusting their senses to the newly discovered complexity, they were able to find microscopic passengers on the back of this rickety craft. The giants lifted the ship from the water as easily as the whale and inspected the immeasurably small lifeforms they had found, who were, to no surprise, in hysterics and threatening with war. The Saturnian with a mere 72 senses could barely hear the atoms making such threats to him, and concluded that attributing intelligence to things so small would be an insult to intelligence itself. So Micromegas implemented his tools to attempt communication with the mites on his mighty hand. After an hour of listening to the ramblings of the crew, the giants were able to understand the English language and finally began speaking. Hello. The inhabitants of the ship were nearly crushed by the sound of the larger giant and bombarded with the burning smell of refined turds from the smaller one. Of the majority threatening war and falling to their knees praying, a scientist appeared to be aboard the vessel and approached in curiosity to speak with these aliens. How is it that you're able to sustain a form your size while still surviving the gravity of our planet? I did not know a creature could grow to 120,000 feet tall. The giants were genuinely blown away by this. This flea on a sliver of metal sailing a shallow pond on a ball of mud was somehow capable of deducing such things? They responded eagerly and began discussing a great number of subjects for hours on end. Science, philosophy, mathematics. The thought that perhaps beings of such size should not be deemed insignificant grew ever stronger in their enormous minds. "O Earthling," began the Sirian, "your existence must be bliss without the tremendous responsibility of technology while still possessing such expansive minds." The scientist looked down in an awkward murmur before finally admitting that only very few humans seek knowledge peacefully. The vast majority, he described, are either shedding blood ruthlessly or glorifying it in the safety of their own homes. Micromegas, perhaps the only Syrian immigrant unaware of the wars, questioned further. "What is the reasoning, might I ask, behind extinguishing another member of your own kin?" "Some patches of dirt," began the scientist, "of which we can see an entirety from this height. Not that the fighters long to own the patches of dirt, but to make sure it is owned by a person they've never met, while killing people they've never met." A deckhand on board the ship interrupted to remind him that he was sounding a bit gay. The Syrian and the Saturnian were enraged with confusion. How could the same ant that can comprehend such complexities share blood with those who spill it? The giants returned to philosophy once more with the topic of whether or not there is a god. But when asked, each ant on board had a very different thing to say. Some of them argued that God is out there beyond reach and is simply too far to find. Another ant proclaimed that he is deep within us. Micromegas asked the scientist, who had remained silent throughout the discussion. "I do not know," the ant admitted. "Understanding the complexity of the human brain, I can deduce that if there was a god, he is unlikely able to communicate with us. At least there's no reason to believe so. However, I believe that there is always something over the horizon, waiting to be discovered. I dedicate my life to pursuing this magnificent nuance rather than settling for certainty." To this the giant smiled. A more militant contrarian interrupted the three, proclaiming that the universe was created for humanity, from the rocks to the plants to the animals to the stars. "All is made for the benefit of mankind," he shouted from the tiny deck, "including you." At this, the two giants burst into uncontrollable laughter. The heaving and convulsing shook the ship violently. The giants recovered from this pit of rapid joy after several minutes. "Then if all life is equally meaningless and material," the ants begged, "then which philosophy is accurate? You are clearly godlike beings, if not gods yourself. What is it that you can tell us that will set our planet Earth onto the path of enlightenment, peace, and prosperity? What is the true idea?" The Saturnian and the Syrian glanced at one another. Then to the curious insects on the palm of his hand, the giant leaned in and uttered, "I don't know." "Good luck," exclaimed Micromegas and his dwarvish companions as they set the vessel back onto the puddle and vanished over the horizon, presumably to continue their journey. Traversing an unimportant corner of the galaxy orbiting your garden variety yellow dwarf, you may find, if you are lucky, a small rock. This rock should rightfully hold no place in your memory among the trillions of identical rocks you've passed along the way. However, this one happens to be the rock where I had the enormous pleasure of meeting somebody who changed my life. His name was Micromegas.